from? I'm from Australia. Where are you really from? Like many immigrants, I get this question a lot. It's a question we hear almost everywhere. In job interviews, in casual chats, on dates, at the back of Ubers. At first, I didn't think much of it. In fact, it felt like a friendly or normal thing to ask. But the more it came up, the more I started wondering, why is this such a common question? And why does it sometimes feel so loaded? For some, it's just small talk, a way to show genuine interest or even to find common ground. But for others, it can feel a little bit more complicated. So is it just curiosity, a cultural faux pas, or something in between? Today we're diving into why this simple question can mean so many different things, and why the answer isn't always as straightforward as it seems. Hello everyone, my name is Marina Khan. I am an immigrant, a cultural researcher, and if you're new to this channel, here I talk about South Asian culture, immigration, history, art, and all the spicy topics in between. So if any of these topics are of interest to you, please join the conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts on them as well. Okay, let's start with the most generous take. Sometimes when people ask, "Where are you from?" it really is just small talk. A conversation starter, a way for people to find common ground. Think about it. You're maybe at a work event or even chatting to someone on a long train ride. They maybe hear your accent or see something about the way that you dress, and they're just curious. For a lot of people, especially those who've moved around or grown up in multicultural environments, the question can actually be a sense of pride. They might light up when they talk about their roots and culture. Their hometown, their migration story, their food, their festivals. It could be a way to share something meaningful or even bond over a shared heritage. And in places where diversity is the norm, like universities, major cities, asking someone where they're from may just be a way to say, "Hey, I want to learn more about you." Plus, not everyone feels the same weight around that question. Some people genuinely don't mind, others just haven't thought much about it. But, and you knew this was coming, that's just one side of the story. Because for some people, this question can feel different, more like a test, a gentle reminder that they're being seen as the other. So I did a small social media poll, nothing scientific, just vibes, and I asked people, how do you feel when someone asks you where you're from? And the most common answer? It depends. It depends on who's asking, it depends on how they ask, and really, it depends on why they're asking. Because the same question, "Where are you from?" can sound very different coming from an Uber driver who just wants to chat versus a colleague who says it with that slight pause. The one where you just know there's a follow-up coming. You know the one. "Oh, but where are you really from?" Ah yes, the sequel no one asked for. Suddenly, it's not about where you've lived or grown up. It's about why you look or sound different. That's why for so many people, this question is not just about curiosity, it's about context. If someone's genuinely interested in your background or your story, and they're framing the question with warmth and respect, it could perhaps lead to a genuine connection. But if it feels like they're trying to categorize you or poke at the parts of you they can't immediately place, that's where it gets tricky. It becomes less about who you are and more about why you don't quite fit into what they were expecting. So yes, it's just 5 words, but depending on who's holding the mic, it can land in 5 different ways. So far, we've talked about how context really matters, how the question "where are you from" can feel casual or even welcome in certain contexts. But then here's where things start to get a little bit more layered. Because even when the question may be asked with kindness, a genuine curiosity or interest, it could still stir something else, a little flicker of otherness. For example, I'd answer, "Oh, I'm from Pakistan." And suddenly the conversation shifts gears. And people are like, "Oh, I love the food from there. The weddings are so fun in your culture. Your culture is so vibrant." It can sometimes feel that you're being reduced to the highlight reel of your culture. The food, the festivals, the fabrics, while every other aspect of you kind of just fades into the background. Even with the best of interest, the question can shift from connection to categorization. From "I'm interested in you" to "I've filed you in a neat little label in my head and it smells like cardamom." And look, it's not always offensive. Sometimes it's just exhausting. Like you're constantly being asked to perform a version of your identity that's been simplified or flattened. And there are instances where the question can cross the line a little bit, in my opinion. Consider this. When the question, where are you from, tends to get followed up by an immediate assumption such as, oh, but you don't look like you're from there. Instead of a genuine interest in the person's background, it can become a subtle reinforcement of a stereotype. Your response isn't just about where you're from, but also about whether you're meeting the expectations of the assumptions the other person has created about you. Expectations on what they believe people from your place should look like, sound like, behave like. In this instance, it's easy to feel that the response is expected to conform to a particular framework. It's as if the asker wants a certain answer, something that fits with their own understanding of where you're from. It's not simply a conversation, but might feel like an obligation to perform your identity in a certain way, especially when you're not a part of the dominant cultural group. For many of us who could feel othered by this question, there's also perhaps an undercurrent of sharam or shame in simply being asked. There's a pressure to minimize or simplify or hide parts of ourselves, to shrink away from the spotlight. Sometimes it's easier to just go along with the stereotypical assumptions rather than disrupt them, because correcting someone or sharing a more nuanced version of where you're really from feels like it might be drawing more attention to the fact that we're different. And it could be more of a statement than people might be comfortable making. It's the kind of sharam that comes from this deep-seated feeling that we don't belong. Like our differences stand out in a way that could be uncomfortable or even alienating. The question, where are you from, can then trigger those feelings of standing out. It's an invitation that could trigger feelings of difference when all you wanted was to be seen as the same. So, when you think about it, the question, where are you from, isn't always as simple as it seems. On one hand, it can be a doorway to understanding, a way of connecting over shared histories and experiences. But on the other hand, it has the potential to reduce complex, layered identities into mere stereotypes, placing the onus of the explanation on the person who's being asked. Even when it's asked with the best of intentions, there is a chance that it may not land as intended. The way we navigate this question, both as those who ask and those who answer, can reveal so much about how we see ourselves and others. It shows how we interact with difference, how we categorize identities, and how we make sense of the diverse world around us. Maybe when we think about this question, perhaps we pause for a second to think about how the question might reflect something larger about society's need to understand, categorize, or oversimplify. So the reason that I'm particularly interested in this topic is because it's always been very difficult for me to answer where I'm from. I was born in Pakistan, but then I grew up in the Middle East, and now I've been in Australia for the longest part of my life. And often what happens if I say that I'm from Australia, they're like, no, but where are you really from? And I think that's where the kind of sense of difference can really come through. So over time, it has become something that I've just started to think about and reflect upon more deeply. But hey, I'm just one person with one perspective. What do you think? Does this question hold a different weight for you? Do you think like it's time to rethink how we ask? Or even whether we ask it at all? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop in a comment and let's continue the conversation. Until next time, take care.